There are definitely a lot of interesting projects building out Cardano, and this is definitely one of them. This is called Algae Token. The team are building out algae farms that can grow anywhere in the world. You can use arid land. It doesn't have to be farming land, where they'll build out ponds and they'll mass produce this algae that can go into multiple different industries, everything from biofuels all the way to the food industry. It has a interesting impact on carbon in that the algae absorbs so much carbon from the atmosphere that it produces quite a bit of O2, oxygen, out of it in the process. So it's a really cool carbon offsetting process too. So if you're really into the eco side of the Cardano blockchain, this is definitely a project for you. Now, the team are also utilizing blockchain in all of this as well, and they have it two catalyst proposals which they're putting out to the community. One of them is around the awareness of algae, and the second is around the business structure of how they're implementing their project, so that you could possibly use their structure or the legal research that they've done to formulate their company and then template that and use that elsewhere. And I'm going to say that we're going to see a lot of this in the future, where a template has already been created to formulate and work around the particular legal structures that already exist. So another company can just come along, click a couple of buttons and launch their own company through blockchain using those legal structures. So I'm pretty interested and really excited about that particular proposal as well. But let's get into this interview.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast.
I have Dylan and Skye joining me on this episode to talk about Algae Token. Yes, algae, the type that you find in ponds, in your fish tank that you want to get rid of, but these guys are actually growing it for a really good reason. Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Pete.
So now we were talking about this at the last Brisbane meetup, and I'm sorry, but you guys were put on the spot and you had to do like a mini impromptu presentation, but we can go and dig deeper into this project now. But can we talk about a little bit about your backgrounds and how you are coming into the crypto space and how this idea came about?
Yeah, so we've been in the space of growing microalgae for a long period of time, and looking at scaling up the projects to take it kind of global. And cryptocurrency is a concept without borders. It's a global method for developing transactions between people, and we saw an opportunity. Myself, I've had very little to do with cryptocurrency, but Dylan certainly has been somewhat more involved in it in the past, and together we all came up with the idea that this could be a viable way to promote the project.
Well, yeah. So I'm a chemical engineer and Skye's a microbiologist with a PhD, and we've both been sort of setting up commercial farms, and just had the idea. I've been looking at a project to do in the crypto space, and I figured what better way to promote sort of algae than through this. So getting it onto the blockchain. We've got several ideas for uses of the token, and also then the basically availability to the whole world to get involved. And that way we can first start, well, our first project is looking in Australia, but then we'd like to be able to expand all around the world. So this is an opportunity to have sort of a worldwide company that runs non-for-profit or social enterprise farms, and then the revenue from that come back into the token. So we've already got the customers and clients there from our commercial work, and now it's just bringing it onto the blockchain. So there's a few hurdles there initially with getting the correct regulations so we're lawful around the world. So that's our biggest challenge to overcome at this stage. And we're speaking to lawyers and accountants to get the right advice on how to do this correctly, because we need to do it in a solid fashion. So there's a lot of ways to set up. We've looked and we understand commercial ways of setting up algae farms. So that whole side of it, totally understand, and we've taken care of. We've done it many times. The getting it onto the crypto space is the biggest challenge as of yet. So I'll get further into it when we go through sort of a bit of a pitch for everyone. But there's yeah, we try to confront one of these things in a catalyst proposal we currently have as well, for initial starting of how to identify the correct regulations and laws to overcome.
All right, there's definitely a lot of hurdles here that we need to overcome for the project so that it can be successful. And I probably want to just dovetail back and learn a little bit more about the whole algae farm process and who your customers are, who you're potentially selling to. And I'm assuming not anyone can just set up an algae farm, right? There are regulations around that because it's going to certain industries that these algae is being produced for, right?
That's correct. So there are regulations. We're largely regulated by aquaculture laws. So you need an aquaculture license to do it commercially. But the process of doing this, it's a microbiological system, and we need to set up a very specific system so you get the production of what you want. Because there's over 1 million species of algae out there, and just like when you grow a crop, you're always avoiding the weeds, and so you've got to have a bit of a green thumb, but also know the biology and also your production system. All right. So the algae, the reason why we're doing it is for our customers being the nutraceuticals primarily is where most of the value is right now. And that's because the nutrition in algae is just unparalleled. It's the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. And there's such a variety of them that you can get a broad range of different nutrition from them. Then there's also your omega-3s that you can get from algae. So the long-chain omega-3s you get from fish actually originally came from algae. And so they're the ones that we're largely focusing on first because there's a lot of demand for that currently. And once we've established that kind of market, we're then also looking at the fortified food market where you can add algae into food. It just is like another product like flour. You're just enhancing the nutritional benefit of things like pastas and breads and even rice. So when you have sushi, it's wrapped in algae. It's the same sort of thing where we can do exactly the same thing, looking at this for a benefit of different ways of people consuming it.
Wow, who would have thought? I did used to consume a lot of spirulina, so it's a very common thing that I do very know the benefits of eating the spirulina and getting the high protein intake from it, especially if you're a vegetarian. It's a really good source of nutrients from the spirulina supplements that I used to take.
Definitely, yes. So spirulina is the most commonly grown algae out there in the world. It's a blue-green algae. So most people think of algae for the harmful algal blooms, which are blue-green algae, which is like spirulina. But the vast majority of algae out there are very beneficial. In fact, algae produce over half the world's oxygen in the oceans. It's the food source for everything all the way up to fish. And so without it, there's the biology on Earth just doesn't really work. So it's kind of one of those unknown little heroes out there on the planet.
All right, so there's a lot of benefits here. That we've got the financial benefits of actually setting up the farm and being a social enterprise there. We got the nutritional benefits, and we also have a whole bunch of other things that you want to talk about as well in this presentation. How about we pull up this presentation slide that you guys have and walk through it and see what you guys got?
Sounds good.
We're a group of engineers and scientists who obviously capable of delivering algae farms and bringing it to the blockchain. Algae Token just aims to create a sustainable algae farming for the future, handling the world's nutrition problem, and also get into global warming and protect aquatic life. We'd like to overcome fossil fuel depletion by creating sustainable algae farms around the globe using non-profit or social enterprise setups. We are not dependent on agricultural water or land, so we're not competing with those. And we're looking at bringing in smart contracts for supply chain tracking, quality assurance. Also, people will be able to purchase the algae products through the token. And that's the main basis of what our aims are there for that. Here we have just a picture of a pilot plant that we use. That's here in Brisbane. So full scale farms, the large pond you see at the top there, that's a fifth of the size, so they're much larger. Now, the premise of the Algae Token over to the right is people buy the Algae Token, we create the algae farms. Now, the profits and revenue from the farms go back to expanding the farms themselves and purchasing more tokens so we can then make new farms globally. So there are those challenges we have in doing that, and that's what we're currently involved in looking at and discussing. This is another view. So once we have one farm, it leads back, and then we can build another farm in UAE or Africa where we want to go. So we'll need to do our feasibility studies and everything to make sure it is sustainable, but we can grow different types of algae for different profits. We know that market well, so that's our specialty.
I'm assuming algaes from algae farms in different parts of the world would be growing different types of algae suitable for the climate, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, and probably suitable for whatever market you're tapping into and selling in that region, maybe.
Yeah, so the algae is very variable based on the temperature of the local environment. So what we grow here in Australia versus UAE will be totally different species, but the nutritional benefits can generally be quite similar. Algae are over 50% protein generally, and many have omega-3 contents, which are excellent supplements. It's just a matter of identifying which species grow best in the local environment and scaling those ones up.
Okay, so why algae? We've talked a little bit already on why algae, but for climate control, so every 2 kilos of CO2 that we feed the algae, they produce 1 kilo of oxygen. So we'd like to, in the future, actively extract CO2 from the atmosphere and feed that to our algae, therefore reducing some of the climate challenges we're currently facing as a planet. We've got the food securities for malnutrition and highly sustainable foods there. The great thing about algae is it's super fast growing. Outcompetes sugarcane by 10 times. So it's very viable, and what sugarcane is the fastest land growing crop on the planet. So we're outcompeting everything for proteins and oils. It doesn't compete with agricultural land or water, and that's very important because that water is going to become very scarce in some places, and that protection is very important. We can use brinish water with different types of water. We're able to find correct species to grow. So we ideally use ocean water, so being close to the ocean is very helpful. It's excellent feedstock for all animals, from fish to cattle, poultry, pigs. There's the human nutrition, which is where our focus is because that's extremely high, and all the omegas in it, DHA and EPA, are very important for our health. And we're all becoming slowly aware of this. So that's another big point that we have, the education to people of this availability and what they're actually missing out on nutritional values that they can get. And then there's obviously the big one, which is how algae first came to sort of fame in this industry, the fuel and energy, which is also a viable option. It's just, I think we'll be looking into that definitely, but it's not the main focus. The food and nutrition is. Once we have several farms up and running and it's big enough and sustainable and profitable, that's when you'd start looking at the energies to provide for local areas that need them.
So I really like a lot of these aspects here and the different types of markets that you are tapping into. Like one of them that you mentioned was the feedstock for animals. And a lot of places around the world are growing corn, maize, and other food supplies that we could consume ourselves as humans, but then sending it on to animals to feed. And having this mass-produced algae is a really, really good alternative. It sounds a lot cheaper to produce compared to these other mass-produced crops that they're using at the moment.
So That's partly true. The production of it is much more efficient than other crops. And depending on the system in aquaculture, we can certainly make it cheaper than other crops. But because of the infrastructure needed to set up the algae farms, they're capitally intensive, the cost of production struggles to meet with crops that are just planted in the ground under commodity style pricing. So we are in the process of trying to meet the commodity style value of those traditional crops that are fed as feed. But the other real benefit is that you need less of these. So often when you've got a low value feed, they still need to add other things to it because it's low value. It's missing important nutrition, and algae are one of the best things to add to it. So it's typically only added in like a 5, maybe 10% to the rest of it, but that's what gives it the extra boost that they need for the animals. It's been shown to really help in raising pigs. Like it doesn't help them put on weight, but it makes them like they have a high survival rate and less health issues. And so there's a real nutrition aspect to it in animal husbandry as well as for people.
All comes back down to that nutrition. And you also mentioned another thing around the carbon capture and feeding carbon to it. How does that work? Like where do you get the carbon for it? How do you capture that to feed into the algae farms?
Currently, there's a transpiration between the atmosphere and the open water on the pond, and we get a certain percentage just naturally from the atmosphere. But because the algae grows so quickly, it can't absorb enough from the atmosphere with just that direct contact. And so we inject CO2 that is a compressed form of CO2, but it doesn't have to be in that form. So there's a technology called direct air capture, which concentrates the atmospheric CO2 from being 0.04% up to around about 80%. And that is a low-cost technology being developed by CSIRO. There's a couple of different technologies out there, but the lowest energy one is from CSIRO. And we're looking at this to capture atmospheric CO2 rather than buying CO2 to feed to the ponds. And that is a much more environmentally friendly way to grow them.
That's huge. All right. Continue, please, Dylan.
Yeah. If I could just say too that with the growing of corn for feed crops and they're also doing it for biofuels. So this is an alternative way for that. So that way you're not using the land and the nutrients in that land, preventing further crops in the future. So it is a definite viable alternative for that. It's just making sure that it's sustainable economically. So that's also to do with the size of the farms. The larger farms that we have, the more availability we have to offset things like that. So we can feed animals and use the fuel.
And just adding to that, if you look at your traditional biofuel crops of soy oil, canola oil, even corn oil, and sugarcane for ethanol, if we want to replace all the fuels used on the planet, we'd have to use over 200% of the arable growing land on the planet to be able to actually produce enough fuel. So it's impossible to actually do this. Whereas for algae, you can do this in the desert because you're growing them in ponds and you're just adding the water to it. So we don't need arable land. We can use seawater. And we need an area that's just a little bit smaller than the size of the Northern Territory in Australia to replace all of the fossil fuels on the planet that we use every year.
Wow.
So compared to other crops, we're about 10 times more efficient at producing biofuels in the same footprint.
Okay. So it all sounds really promising, but I guess, like you said, it has to be financially viable, and it sounds like the infrastructure cost to actually get this started for you guys is probably quite high.
It is. It's the biggest challenge, and the reason why we were looking at crypto as an alternate form of getting the interest and the capital to be able to create these projects.
So we mentioned that there's a million varieties of algae. So we focus on several. The list is actually longer than this, but these are some of the algae that we grow, and we've got some pictures here. So down the bottom right, we're growing Haematococcus, and that has the astaxanthin in it that they use to inject salmon to get the pink color. So we have the non-synthetic astaxanthin, the natural one, which is better for you. Currently, it's synthetically grown, which has some negative benefits to health. So the positives of algae outweigh synthetic growth for these things. We've got different types of algae that provide beta-carotene, which is also found in carrots, but we can just outgrow them, 100-fold. So there's much benefits in the crops that we can grow. So this is just a short list, and we do grow many more, but it's just an example of multiple varieties giving multiple benefits, and whether we head into looking for lipids or oils for fuels or for plastics, or we're looking for EPA and DHA for a nutraceutical, or we're looking for cosmetic or pharmaceutical. It depends what you grow and what we can do with that. So the market for algae and for health supplements is ginormous in the world, 170 billion, and that's probably even being fairly conservative with that. Yeah, that number's probably a lot bigger than that too. But these are numbers that I found recently. So the global algae market, 3.6 billion. I think that's very conservative. It's hugely growing.
That's the size of the omega-3s that can be produced from the algae.
So that's one facet of what can be produced with algae. So it's a largely growing business that is in its infancy at this stage. And if we can get this onto the blockchain and growing, could lead that globally for the planet and the benefits that it produces. The roadmap for Algae Token at this stage, we've launched the website and white paper. Our version 1 is up. We've got 2 proposals for the Cardano Catalyst project, which I'll go into in a little bit more depth in a second. So our next steps are pre-sale and getting onto a launch pad. We're talking to accelerator programs, looking at launch pads. Then it will be audits and listing on DEXs and enabling swap of them. And through all of that, we'll create our first algae farm. So we have plans for its scalability to grow manageable, make sure it's profitable, and then expand to, a ginormous farm once that all goes through, and then start spreading around the world. So there can be benefits, job creation, and provide food and benefits for other countries that aren't as well adapted and the food's not available. And then extended marketing. So our marketing hasn't been huge as to date because we've been trying to basically overcome the legal and regulatory hurdles that we're facing. So we need to have them fairly solid. So we've started sort of marketing and letting people know that we're here and we're doing stuff and we're looking into it, and hopefully very soon it'll be available for people, but we need to get the correct regulatory standards all in practice. The first of the idea scale, like the Catalyst program, is a sustainable solution hub. So that's a hub for micro and macro algae to get together and educate people on all these benefits that we've just talked about: climate, food, securities, and everything we can do with these products. So people become aware that there are other alternatives just to planting trees for carbon capture and for, benefits nutritionally. So this will also help Cardano reach a net zero sort of climate goal through us being on the blockchain. So it has its benefits there for that. And the second one is the business standards. So this has been, our greatest challenge, building a decentralized sustainable business model using off-chain and on-chain practices to get that and around the hurdles, not just locally but internationally. So to set up algae farms around the world and have revenue from non-for-profit or from social enterprise businesses go back to the token, have to do that legally, and no issues there with any of the countries you're dealing in. So that's it's a difficult thing because there's not really many examples out there as of yet that are doing it in this fashion. So we're sort of trailblazing through this and trying to do it right. So this proposals that we have, we will then give feedback to the Cardano community. So then other people can follow what we've found and then progress on. We'd like to create business models for crypto regulatory standards that others can follow. We'll be providing reports and analysis for social enterprises. Yeah, we need to identify those regulatory needs and requirements and the laws and the legal structures and business models that are capable of doing that. So we follow a scientific approach too, like Cardano, and that is one of our great draw cards to Cardano with the peer review justifications there, with everything done scientifically. And that's the way we've always worked with our research, with the algae industry. And we'd like to, be in a facet where, or blockchain where that's current standard and makes sense to us.
Fantastic. There's lots of aspects that will come out of that business model that you guys are developing, especially around the legal aspects as well. I think that's a lot of things that people don't look into. They might start a project, launch a token, and not realize that they're creating a security token and actually potentially breaking the law if they're not complying with the regulatory bodies that govern their country wherever they're launching the token or who has access to it. Now, with Algae Token, what legal issues are you looking into at the moment that could potentially be reflected back through your proposal here?
Primarily, the biggest one is if we have to register as a security and not a utility, which is the way we've set everything up and the main the drive of what we're doing. It is much more of a security than a utility. So we're trying to see if we can bring in enough features that it is classified as a utility, but we're looking at all of the regulatory requirements for each country where we'd want to propose sales of the token so that we can make sure that we pass the regulatory requirements of a security. And so that's been our biggest hurdle to date, trying to manage that balance, and also which countries you're allowed to actually be purchased from.
Yeah, where we can sell to, who can, be involved in the ICOs or staking. What's available to who? So that's where we're speaking to lawyers, accountants to get this correct. We're hoping that assistance from some launchpads might be enabled too in that stream, but there is a lot of work to do this correct. I mean, we can sort of only start it once, and we need to do it correctly. So we're looking for Algae Token itself, as it will be operating internationally. There's multiple countries in the world that possibly be suitable for the token itself. And then, physically setting up an algae farm first in Australia, we need to make sure that we do that via the regulatory system in Australia. But they are somewhat separated, and we need to be able to justify the communication and, flow of funds between those. So that's another hurdle there to make sure we have solutions, but we need to make sure that they're secure from multiple angles, as to make sure the legal structure is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Lots of aspects to look into. All right. So there's always an issue for me when it comes to consuming algae, and that is the taste. Now, I know you guys are only producing the algae to sell on to manufacturers, but what are they doing about the taste so it's a little bit more palatable for consumers? Because I think that's a bit of a barrier for a lot of food products when it's bright green and not quite appealing for the taste buds sometimes.
So you've got three things that are important when it comes to taste, and the first is the quality of production. So if you start with something that isn't a good quality, it's hard to hide that taste. So we always look at how do we ensure that we have the highest quality product, and also when it comes to processing, that's just as important as the cultivation, understanding how to process it to a final state. And there's a broad variety, and I've had lots of spirulina, some that taste quite nice, I think, and some that you just wouldn't want to ever go near again. So you've got to have good quality product. The second thing is, if you're having it as a nutraceutical, some people just pop pills and you don't really have the flavor there, but it's kind of cheating. And not many people like to have pills. It's hard to get, it feels like you're having medicine. But the real trick to it is blending it into foods where it complements the food. So sushi, your seaweed is an algae and it tastes like a seaweed. If you eat those seaweed unflavored ones raw, it just tastes pretty much the same as the algae we grow. And so by blending it with the right foods, you can make a whole array of foods that taste fantastic. And so when we add it into breads, we only add, around about 3% of algae to the flour. And so you make a green bread, but you don't even taste the algae because it just blends in with that savory taste, and it adds a nice balance to it. If you make pesto, we can put around about 30% algae in there because of all the other flavors in the pesto. It just adds to it and it just complements that savory flavor. If you mix it with tomatoes, it's also a good complementary flavor. However, if you try to mix it in with chocolate biscuits or sweet things, it doesn't work. It's trying to add fish sauce to a chocolate biscuit isn't generally the best way to go. So minimizing the taste by production techniques is paramount, but also blending it with the right foods in the right ratios. Our highest ratio that we have that's not 100% is 50% algae in a protein bowl. So lots of cacao, chocolate, and other flavors in there makes it quite palatable.
Right, awesome. So I can see a MasterChef episode coming out of this to really kind of educate people on how to do it.
Another process would be like so extracting the oil and having the high value oil, and then being left with a defatted biomass, which is protein. So that protein has a lot of the flavor removed because they're now in an oil. So then you could, as Skye said, have that as a high value nutritional pill, or you could spread it into some other manufacturing where they do put in a low amount so it's not as overpowering, and then eat the protein, which is defatted, so it's fairly tasteless then.
Yeah. So
that can be turned into a flour, which can be used for bread or for pasta, things like that.
It's about, once you've extracted all of the nutrients, it's about 70% protein in that powder, and it just tastes like, it's very bland. It's got almost no flavor to it. Another way is we've got, I don't know if we can see this, but this is one of our clients who are taking the algae and adding it into his turmeric protein bars, and they're called Wham Bams. He's also got Chicky Bams and another one called Swamp Bam. When you add too much algae, it tastes. I like the flavor. It's a very specific taste that you've got to acquire, but with the right flavors that go along with it, it's not bad. It's just a different kind of umami flavor.
I think it's a growing field with many possibilities. Once we get more into the food engineering side of it and the products highly available, one of the largest problems we've had is the availability of product. We're not able to keep up with the demands, and so having the possibility of having large farms creating this in a quality controlled way then gives us opportunity to look into more products which are food-based. I'm a chemical engineer and food engineer, so this is a very exciting field to be in, and there's multiple possibilities for us to make a whole plethora of food for consumption, whether it be going into snacks or into meats whichever this is going to be multiple directions we can go into and overcome that sort of overpowering taste.
Absolutely amazing. Like, but I could see like the protein content of this is really high, and I'm just looking at the fitness industry, for example, and there's a lot of vegans in the industry as well that like to take protein supplements, whey powders, whatever it is. But those supplements are about 20% protein, and the rest of it is whatever else additives they add in. If you can extract out that overpowering taste and smell and flavors of like a spirulina or whatever it is, and get 70% concentration of protein in it, that's pretty amazing. And tapping into the fitness industry alone is like huge.
That's a big industry, yeah.
It definitely is, and it's not just the fact that it's 70% protein. It's 50% of that protein is essential amino acids, which you have to get from your diet. You can't make it yourself. And so if we look at beef, which is about 40% protein, and then the essential amino acids are less than half, you're getting around about 17% in a steak of your essential amino acids compared to around 35% essential amino acids from your from the algae. And so we're nearly double what a steak is in its actual nutritional value from the protein side. But if you look at the whole biomass, it's got all the B vitamin. If you take 8 grams a day, it gives you all your B12 that you need and pretty much all your B vitamins, but it gives you all of your B12. Gives you all the iron requirements you require. It's, I think it was about 30 times amount of iron in it compared to beef, and a whole host of other minerals and other vitamins and phytonutrients, as well as omega-3. So it's amazing what it can actually provide, especially if you're a vegan.
All right. Sounds like I'm going out to my local health store and buying some more spirulina supplements and getting back into it again. It's been quite a while for myself. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the economic scale of these farms. Like, I'm assuming it costs quite a lot to actually build out these farms, and I don't know how much capital you need to raise to build the one that Swami just presented there. But with that capital, how much do you need to sell, and when would you get a return on your initial investment? It
very much depends on the value of the product that you sell. But looking at the omega-3 market and the capital required to set up a 10-hectare facility, it's pretty much $1 million per hectare once you get to that scale and continuing on that scale. And then each year, the revenue is close to $1 million per hectare. Once we look at our profit after everything else, it ends up being closer to $300,000 per hectare per year. So we're looking at a payback period of around about 3 years to pay off your initial investment, and then it's free profit from then on. But once the biggest cost is establishing the actual infrastructure. And once you're up and running, it's relatively low cost to run it and has very high output. And if you join a consortium where we can get a lot of these farms all running together at the same time, we can share a lot of processing infrastructure, which reduces those costs. And so that's a big part of what we're looking at, is how to create a community collective of production rather than just, one mega farm sort of thing. It does make a lot of sense if you create a network of farms to all work together.
Brilliant. So 3-year turnaround on the initial investment if all things go well. Okay.
Yes.
So where can people find out more about the project and these proposals that you have as well? I'm assuming they're on your website. And what's the website?
So algaetoken.com is the website. We've got links down the bottom to Discord, community, and then we do have 2 projects in the Catalyst that are available if you go to the Cardano ideal scale. So Twitter is also there, and that has links to those projects. So we're starting to grow the community, so jump on in and join us and leave your comments there and let us know what you think. Eventually, we'll be looking at governance and things like that, so the public can then vote on where the next farms should be and where we should go, what we should grow, and who we should help. So there's going to be a lot of growth there with that.
Absolutely amazing. I'll make sure all the links are in the video description and the show notes so everyone can find out more about Algae Token and support the project, and fingers crossed also vote for those catalyst proposals as well. Every vote counts, so fingers crossed you get those votes across the line too. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on the episode. It's been an absolute pleasure, and also so cool that these Brisbane-based projects are coming out and building on Cardano as well. So congratulations on that too.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, heaps, Pete.
So are you convinced? Are you going to go out and try some algae supplement, some spirulina maybe, and add it to your diet and see how it affects your metabolism, how it affects your mood, how it affects your energy and protein intake? It's quite an interesting supplement. I have tried it before. I'm into this little bit of a extra fitness kick at the moment, so maybe it's a good thing that I'm starting this again. Oh, and if you saw on Twitter, I'm starting a push-up challenge for the month of June, so I'll put a link down there. It's a little campaign that I'm trying to do to raise money for mental health and awareness in general. Now, if you really like this project, I'll put all the links down below for you. You can join their Twitter, join their Discord, and also check out their Project Catalyst proposals. Those ones are quite interesting and would, I think they'll really appreciate the votes for these particular proposals. Now, if you like this type of content, if you really like Cardano, please consider giving me that thumbs up, click subscribe, click the notification bell, and you hear more from me soon. See you in the next video.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debating.